2, 3,
4,
5.
6.
Okay, first, thank all of you for coming to listen to my speech. I think it's pretty safe to say that as Americans, we're pretty accustomed to our way of life, and we don't know much about the other cultures around the world. I hope from listening to my speech that you will learn more about Saudi Arabia and the way that they handle punishment. According to drugwarfacts.org, in 2009, 1,663,582 arrests were made because of drug law violations in the USA. Although this fact is disturbing, it is even more frightening to know that this crime and many other crimes could lead to being publicly executed in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, during 2007, 40 executions were done due to drug-related crimes alone. Saudi Arabia is a country that is not afraid to use the death penalty. Murder, adultery, rape, sexual misconduct, armed robbery, theft, blasphemy, homosexuality, prostitution, witchcraft, and drug abuse are all crimes that could potentially end in being publicly executed by a sword. I have provided each one of you with a table of crimes. The first column is the crime, the second column is the average punishment in the US, and the third column is a punishment that you could receive in Saudi Arabia. You'll be able to see from looking at the table the extreme differences in the way each culture handled these crimes. For example, on the last line, it shows that prostitutes are only issued a fine if they are first-time offenders in the US, which can be as low as $250. But in Saudi Arabia, prostitutes have been executed for breaking the law. I'd also like to tell you guys about a few more instances. A father of 5 left his on-screen job in Lebanon where he told fortunes and horoscopes to head to Saudi Arabia in 2008. According to VOA News, this fortune teller known as Saibat was practicing a pilgrimage known as Umrah when police busted in and arrested him. Although there is not any legal definition of witchcraft in Saudi Arabia, he was convicted for the crime. Saibat was sentenced to death penalty by beheading in April 2010. However, this particular instance received massive news coverage, protests, and appeals, which had temporarily saved his life. Another crime that Saudi Arabia does not take lightly is armed robbery. In 2004, 4 migrant workers were committed armed robbery and were given no legal assistance during a court battle. The 4 men were sentenced to the death penalty, which took place in 2007. The Saudi court wanted to make an example out of them, so the men were beaten, beheaded, and then the Saudi court had their bodies strung out in a public square to scare other immigrant workers. While this might seem extremely disturbing to us Americans, it is nothing but normal for the Saudi Arabian people, even the executioners. Saudi Arabia's lead executioner was interviewed in 2003 by BBC News and told his views and beliefs on the capital punishment system. Mohammed Saad al-Rashid told the Daily Arab News, quote, "Despite the fact that I hate violence against women, when it comes to God's will, I have to carry it out," unquote. He believes that executing men and women of all ages is justified by God and that he is doing the right thing. Muhammad goes on talking about how normal his life is and the support he receives from his family and friends. He also says that nobody is afraid of him because of his job, and that it hasn't been held against him during his life. Another strange thing that Muhammad mentions is that he also has his children sharpen the sword that he uses to behead people during the executions. It is obvious that this particular culture lives an extremely different life than us Americans do. Although Americans do not tolerate crime, Saudi Arabia has a very different view on how crimes should be handled. In Saudi Arabia, executions are done for crimes that receive less than a life sentence in the US. I do not believe that there's a right way to handle each crime. Every culture has a different system of punishment, and their right and wrong is based on the way they were raised. Is there any questions?
Did you use a visual?
I did use a visual. That's the table that you have in your hands.
And you think it was effective?
I think it makes the point that the differences